Welcome back to Cozy Rosy Crochet. I'm excited to have you with me today as I share the second square in the Hodgepodge Blanket Crochet Along. Today we're going to be learning how to crochet the blossom stitch in an 8 by 8 inch square. Now, as you can see, this is a highly textured stitch, but it's also a nice lacy stitch as well. You've got lots of open fabric here in this square, and we're going to be learning a couple of different techniques. We're going to be learning more about working into chain spaces as we create this beautiful blossom stitch square. If you haven't already, make sure that you've hit that subscribe button and of course the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of the other square designs that are being released as part of the Hodgepodge Blanket Crochet Along. Also, you can view the written pattern that is linked for you in the description box below, along with all the chapters you'll need to skip through if you need to crack on making this square. If you've missed any of the other squares in the event, or you're just catching up now, don't forget that you can find the full list of all the squares included in the event in the description box. There's a link directly to the roundup post of all 30 of the squares. So let's find out the materials we're going to need to make our blossom stitch square. So the materials that we're going to be needing for our blossom stitch square is of course our Aran weight or worsted weight yarn. I'm using my PaintBox Yarns Simply Aran. It's 100% acrylic, and I'm going to be using the paper white. No, it's not, it's champagne white. So it's a little bit more creamy than the paper white, and it's shade number 202. Now, I like white as much as the next person when it comes to a nice clean look, but when I'm pairing it with these lilacs and the purples, I think the almost off-white or the creamy white looks a lot warmer than the paper white. And this is the first square that we're doing together in this shade. So grab that yarn that you're going to need. You're only going to need, I think it's about 55 to 60 meters in that. I'm going to be using my Furls 5mm crochet hook, still my absolute favorite. If you've never used a bamboo or a wooden hook, they are really great, especially if you're learning to crochet, mainly because as you use the hook, the wood gets smoother and it just kind of doesn't go too quickly, whereas some of the resin or the metal hooks, the yarn can fall off even more so than with a wooden hook. So I've got a darning needle, and of course I've got some scissors for when we finish our project, but this square I'm working in one solid colour. This pattern also looks great worked up in 2 different colours. You can change colour maybe every 2 rows to really show a difference between those stitches. But gather all of your materials and let's get started. So the blossom stitch square is worked in rows. So we're going to make a starting chain, and to do that by making a loop with our working yarn at the front, dropping the working yarn behind and pulling through. We're then going to place that loop on our hook and tighten, pulling that working yarn. We're going to start by making a chain of 33. So we yarn over the hook and bring our hook through to create our chain, and we do that for a total of 33. So that's 4. And remember, the way to count your chain is just by counting one side of the chains. So I've got 4 there, remembering that this loop doesn't count. So make your chain of 33 and I'll see you in a moment. So once we have our chain of 33, you can see that you've got 2 different sides to your chain here. That's the plaited side and this is the right side as in my head. And what we're going to do is we're going to work underneath the top loop of this chain. Because we're going to be putting an edging all the way around this chain, we don't need to work to create a nice edging. We're going to do that at the end. So we're going to start by working into the 3rd chain from hook, and we're going to work our first blossom stitch. And that's made up of a double crochet, in US terms, a chain 1, and another double crochet, all worked into the same stitch. So remembering that this loop on our hook doesn't count, we're looking for the 1, 2, 3rd chain. So we yarn over the hook, insert our hook under that top loop, yarn over, bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's the US double crochet, a UK treble crochet. We chain 1, and then we're going to work a further US double crochet into the same chain. So we yarn over the hook, insert, yarn over, bring that loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We then skip the next chain, and into the one after we're going to work 1 single crochet. which is a UK double crochet. We're then going to skip the next chain. Working into the next chain, we're going to work 1 double crochet, a chain 1, and a further double crochet into that same chain. We skip the next chain and work a single crochet in the chain after that. We're going to repeat this the whole way down our chain. So we skip 1 chain, working 1 double crochet, a chain 1, and a further double crochet into the same chain. We skip the next chain and work a single crochet into the next. So we're going to repeat that all the way down until we reach the end. Now what I will say is, if you do struggle to locate the ends of your rows, which is quite a common problem, if you have a stitch marker to hand, this is a good time to kind of stop and mark that second chain that we missed, because those 2 chains that we missed at the beginning when we worked into that 3rd chain, they count as a single crochet. So here's that first chain. If you look from the front, you've got 1 chain at the bottom and you've got that second chain just poking around the side. And it could be really easy to skip that chain when we come back on row 2. So I'm just going to mark it with a stitch marker, and you can do the same, because here's our stitch and there's our chain next to it. But when we come back, it'll be harder to see that. But if we leave the stitch marker in, we're going to definitely be able to locate it and make sure that we know where we're working into. So continue to repeat that stitches all the way along. So we skip 1 chain, work a double crochet, a chain 1, and a further double crochet into the next. We then skip the next chain and work a single crochet into that next chain. Repeat that all the way along, and I'll meet you at the end of our first row. So I'm just working my last single crochet into that last stitch. I skipped that stitch in between, that chain, sorry, in between, and that is the end of row 1. So we've got these lovely kind of fans or shell stitches with a single crochet in between. So going into row 2 of the blossom stitch square, we're going to start by making a chain of 4. So this chain 4 counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. And we're going to skip this next stitch as well and work directly into the chain 1 space, working 1 US single crochet. We then chain 1, and then into the top of that single crochet from the previous row, we're going to work 1 double crochet. We then chain 1. We're going to repeat that all the way across row 2. So we single crochet in between those 2 double crochets from the previous row, directly into that chain 1 space, followed by a chain 1, and then we work a double crochet into the top of the single crochet. So we're skipping this stitch and working into the single crochet. Chain 1, and then repeat all the way to the end. We're going to work 1 double crochet into the top of that original starting chain. So I'll meet you there so we can double check we're putting our stitch into the right place. So single crochet, chain 1, skip the next stitch and double crochet into the next. Chain 1. So I'm just working my last single crochet into the top of that chain 1 space, working another chain 1, and then we're going to end by skipping that double crochet and working 1 double crochet into the top of that second chain that we left unworked at the beginning of our chain. So at the end of row 2, you're going to have 9 double crochets, 8 single crochets, and 16 chain 1 spaces. Going into row 3, we chain 1, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into the same stitch as that chain 1, because that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Then into the top of that single crochet from the previous row, we work the double crochet, chain 1 and a further double crochet all into the same stitch. Then into the top of this double crochet we work our single crochet, so we're skipping that chain 1 space. We're just going to repeat that all the way along. So we skip the next chain 1 space, working our double crochet, chain 1 and a further double crochet into the next stitch. We skip the next chain 1 space and work 1 single crochet into the next. We're going to skip this chain 1 space here, working our double crochet, chain 1 and a double crochet. We just repeat that all the way across. So continue to repeat that all the way across to the end of this row, and I'll meet you for our final stitch. So we're going to work 1 final single crochet into the 3rd chain on that chain 4 we made in the previous row. So 1, 2, 3, going to make sure I've inserted my hook through 2 loops of that chain and then work that final single crochet. So at the end of row 3 you should have 16 double crochets, 9 single crochets and 8 chain 1 spaces between your double crochets. So for rows 4 to 18 we're going to repeat rows 2 and 3, ending on a row 2 repeat, so that we can then move on to our edging. You don't need to fasten off or turn your work before we move on to our edging. So keep repeating rows 2 and 3 and I'll meet you in a moment for our edging. So I've just finished my 18th row of this beautiful blossom stitch, and it's hard to see, but if you hold it up to the light you can see so much of this wonderful texture showing through. So we should have ended that we have a chain 4 space here, and we've just worked that last double crochet into the top of that stitch there. That helps keep the edges really nice and square of this pattern. Now it should be measuring roughly 8 inches down the side and 8 inches across as well. So what we need to do once we've worked our square, we're going to add our edging. And I've already started because I'm naughty. Let me undo that. It's autopilot, putting a chain 1 at the start. So from the edging, we're not going to turn our project or anything like that. We're just going to continue to work around. We're going to chain 1 and then we're going to work down the edge of our row, of our ends of the rows. So this is the top of our project where we can see our stitches. Give you a good look to make sure you can see them. It's not very clear because of the type of stitch we're doing, but we're going to work down these ends of the rows here, and what we're aiming to do is to evenly place 24 single crochets between here and the corner. So to do that, what we're going to do is to work into the ends of the rows. So quite simply, we've chained 1 so we can turn, and we're just going to insert our hook into that chain space and work a single crochet. Then you can see there's a little bit of a hole here, so we're going to work into that hole there, another single crochet. So that's 2. There's a hole there, so let's work into that one. That's 3, and just kind of keep an eye to make sure that your stitches are evenly placed, and then we can work into that chain space. So we're going to work all the way down the side, evenly placing those stitches. I'm not going to show you where because I might need to adjust mine if I get too many as well, but you're aiming for 24 single crochets by the time we get to this corner here. So I've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, so I've got to place 20 stitches between here and here. Don't have to be too much of an exact science about it, but just as long as your stitches look nice and even, they're not all bunched up and distorting the square. So just continue to work down. You can skip an end of a row if you need to get to the right stitch count, and I will meet you ready to work our first corner. $23 and $24. Well, how lucky was I to get all of those in? You see that some of them look a little bit bigger than others, but we're looking just to get them evenly spaced. That's so that when we join all our squares together at the end, it'll be a little bit easier. So now we've got this last chain that we're going to work into. So we're going to do the first chain of our foundation chain. So this is going to be the corner. So we're going to work our corner stitch, which is 1 single crochet, a chain 1 and a further single crochet into that corner there to give us a little corner shape. And then we're going to work evenly across the end of our starting chain, and again we're aiming for 24 roughly. So just work across. So I'm working in the bottom of those stitches. You can see that I've got a bit of a chain space there, so I'm just going to work into that chain space, and again we're just aiming for a total of 24 single crochets across to the next corner. So I'll meet you ready to work that next corner together, and again just make sure that your stitches are nice and evenly spaced. I have snuck an extra little one in there because I've got 25. That's good enough for me. No one's going to notice when I seam that up together. And it's looking a lot more square, isn't it? So that's good. So where your slip knot was, or your first ever chain, we're going to work that corner, which is 1 single crochet, a chain 1 and a further single crochet. I don't know why I always do that. And that's into our corner space. I am going to try and work over my tail as we go back up, and again we're aiming for those 24 single crochets all the way up to our next corner, and I will meet you there. So you can see that we're back to this corner here. I've got my stitches nice and evenly spaced. Give them a bit of a stretch to keep our edges straight. Beautiful. And obviously we had our chain of 3, so I've only done 23, so I'm going to place a second single crochet into that same space, because then we're going to work our corner into that third chain that we had. So there's number 4 and there's number 3 for me. So I'm going to work my corner into that third chain, chain 1 again, and then work a second single crochet, and that ends our square nicely with a little corner there as well. Now we're going to work back across here, and again across the top of row 18, and we're going to place our single crochets across, aiming for about 24 into each chain space, and stitch across if we can. We're going to skip these single crochets. That will make life a little bit easier, and that should give us the right stitch count. So I'm going to work into the top of each double crochet, each chain space, and then the double crochet, and that should give us a nice stitch count and help show off that stitch that we created with this blossom stitch as well. That's number 22. I'm going to do one here, 23, and then one into that chain space for number 24. So we're going to need to still work our final corner as well, and I'm going to go in through that space there rather than into the actual chain space, because it will make it too large. So I'm going to work 1 single crochet, a chain 1 and a further single crochet, and then we can slip stitch to the first single crochet we made back in the round, and then we have our completed square. I'm going to encourage you, as always, to make sure that you weave these ends in. There aren't many to do on this square compared to yesterday's, so fasten off, make a little chain 1, make a little knot, get these ends woven in. I've just worked over this one, but I'm still going to come back and weave it in a little bit more, because I want to make sure that it's all as neat as possible. And if we weave them in now, we don't need to weave them in at the end when we're joining our blanket. I hope you've enjoyed this lovely textured square. It creates this wonderful open fabric, and I'm going to be back with you tomorrow for the 3rd square in the Hodgepodge Blanket Crochet Along. I hope you're enjoying the event and you found this one a little bit quicker and easier than yesterday's square. Of course, I would love to see your finished squares, so please make sure that you're tagging me on Instagram or in Facebook. You can either use the hashtag Hodgepodge Blanket Crochet CAL, C-A-L, or you can just tag me using @CozyRosieUK on Instagram or on Facebook. I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow for another one of our granny square patterns, ready to create our own hodgepodge blanket.